I'm Tony Taylor. Are you here for Leaders Lead the podcast? Let's go. Hey, how did you beat me? Look, let me tell you about this podcast. We got like 5 seconds. Leaders Lead the podcast is about leadership. Not just the leader without, but the leader within. All of these leaders that I'm talking to across the country, well, across the world now, they have one thing in common, and that's that they have overcome some insurmountable obstacles to get to where they're at today. Come on, let's go. Hey, welcome back to Leaders Lead the podcast. I am here with Emily Clouse. She is the commissioner, one of the commissioners in Thurston County. She is running again for her position, and in a really cool race that I'm really excited about. I kind of got some invested interest in it. I'll be honest. I brought Emily on the show because I want to hear more about her story. If you took the time to do a quick Google, you could see kind of the controversy that's kind of been surrounding around her and the job that she has. But what I want to do, like I said in the intro, is look at, not just the controversy, but what it takes and what it's like when you're a leader under fire that still has a job to do in the public. I hope did I get that right? Did that sound a little bit about kind of like what's been going on? Like you got a job to do, but you're under fire.
Yeah. I mean, it's one way to describe it. That's for sure. I think a lot of people would describe it differently, but I think you did a pretty good job.
So thank you again for coming on the show. I'm excited. I'm excited to finally sit down and talk to you. I mentioned to you that several people have already said, you got to get Emily on the show. And I'm like, yeah, I think I might've reached out to you a couple years ago, but finally we are here and I'm super excited. The thing that I was thinking about was, what shaped you before politics? How did you get into this?
Yeah, so I guess what shaped me before politics, starting from the time I was born, I experienced a lot before, taking me way back. Let's see, I guess I'll start with the fact that I was born and raised in Thurston County. I was adopted by my grandparents when I was born. Actually, before I was born, they're on my birth certificate and everything. So that's pretty cool. But my biological parents were struggling with addiction and homelessness and incarceration, and they just weren't equipped to take care of me at that time. So my grandmother stepped in and was like, no, I'm not going to let you just raise her in this environment, nor am I going to let you like give her up for foster care or anything like that. Like I'll take her in. So my grandma and grandpa took me in. I call them mom and dad though. But they gave me a really good life. They kept me really stable. And yeah, so I'm really blessed and fortunate to have had such amazing parents who could do that for me. And throughout my teen years though, so I always knew my birth mom. She was always a part of my life growing up, but it wasn't until I was about a teenager that I met my biological father. And that definitely shifted things for me in my life. I had wanted to know him for a long time. My parents were always honest with me about my childhood and what had happened. And I really wanted to meet my birth dad because I only knew a little bit about him. But from what I did know, I thought he was like so cool. Like I saw pictures of him like with super long matty hair and playing guitar. And I thought he looked like Kurt Cobain. And
he's like a hippie.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah. He's cool. And I know him still to this day. He's an awesome person, but like all I knew of him was just like that picture and a couple things my parents told me about him. And that was it. And I actually would go and look for him downtown, like from the age probably 11, 12-ish, just by myself. And I would like sneak away and not tell my parents I was going downtown. And I had like a whole investigative notebook dedicated to trying to find my birth dad. And I would go down, I called Bread and Roses. They were still down, they were still a thing. And I was like, I'm looking for my dad. Like, can you help me find him? And I finally got to meet him when I was about 13 years old at Music 6000 of all places, during a piano lesson. He was there and he ran into my dad, and it just seemed like a really good time for us to get connected. Like, he was clean and sober. He was moving into an Oxford house. He was getting his life on track. And my dad was like, this is pretty serendipitous. I think maybe it's a good time for you to meet. So that was a huge part of my life. And then, of course, I hit my teen years and kind of struggled with just like, I don't know, a lot of anxiety. Wasn't getting along with my parents, just wasn't really, there was a lot that I felt I was really struggling with. So I ended up joining the Army actually when I was 17, after reading the book, The Kite Runner. And I don't know if you've ever read that book. Have you ever read The Kite Runner?
I haven't.
Oh, you haven't.
Uh,
It was it was a book that really shaped a lot of the way that I understand responsibility and loyalty. And it actually, I read it in high school, and it's what ultimately pushed me to join the Army, because it just really shaped fundamentally to me like what it means to step in when something is wrong. And so that's kind of what like motivated me to join the military. And at the time, I was also looking for a way to move forward in my own life, and that story just gave me a moral direction that I felt like I could commit to. And all of that shaped how I understood service, not just as a duty, but as a moral responsibility to act when something's not right. So that really pushed me into being in the military. And, I enlisted as an intelligence analyst when I was 17 years old, went through basic, went through AIT, and then got stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado. And 21 days after I turned 19, I was on a plane to the Middle East, getting deployed. I went to Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, 19 years old, and I was actually one of the first women in a combat unit, because they started allowing women to be in combat units in 2013, which was the same year I enlisted. So I went to an armored brigade which is a bunch of tankers, and I was an intelligence analyst. And there were only 6 women enlisted soldiers in a battalion of about 800 men. So that really shaped a huge way that I see the world. And a lot of the trajectory of my life was shaped due to that experience in the military as well. And I did end up getting out of the Army a bit early. I had a lot of concussions when I was deployed. And so that was just one reason why I wasn't able to really be effective, in my role. I was having a lot of collateral consequences. I had migraines all the time. I started fainting all the time. It was just really bad. So I got out of the military early, came back to Thurston County, finished my associate's degree at SPSCC, and then transferred to the University of Washington, Tacoma, where I earned my bachelor's in psychology with a minor in global engagement. And I started a student-led organization while I was at the University of Washington, so that people who were experiencing life after incarceration had a landing spot in higher education. And so sort of trying to like reduce that school to prison pipeline and start building a pipeline from prison to higher education. And it was through learning, it actually was during an adult psychology class. We learned about solitary confinement and the justice system, and heard some testimony from several amazing people. But Shaka Senghor is actually one person whose story really touched me. And he spoke about his experience in solitary confinement specifically. And a lot of it really felt, I don't know, it just hit me because it really, I could connect to it based on my experience in the military and some of the things that I went through, which were absolutely horrific. And I'm surprised that things like that are even allowed to happen. So, and that's kind of how I felt when I learned about Shaka Senghor's experience in solitary confinement. And it just like lit something in me that was like, this is not how we should be treating people. Like, nobody should be treated this way. And as a society, I can't accept the fact that we allow this to happen. So I just started with a student-led organization trying to help write to people who are incarcerated, help bring some level of humanity to that realm, and started donating books to people who are incarcerated, and just really working with this community who has so much to offer, and they're so often overlooked. And that's kind of how I got involved in that area. And then when I graduated, and I've kind of speed this up because we're just on the first question, but
No, you're good. You're good.
but when I graduated from the University of Washington, it wasn't too far after that we that COVID hit, and there was a lot going on in the world, obviously, when COVID hit. But for me, I was also going through a divorce. I was on my way to grad school in Los Angeles to study social psychology, to get a PhD in social psychology at Claremont Graduate University, where I was accepted with a fully paid opportunity to, get my PhD in psychology. And I actually didn't get to go because I was going through this divorce, and it unfortunately took a huge toll for a couple years, and the process was just really long. And so I deferred enrollment and still wasn't ready to go. So I had to bypass that opportunity. But someday I'll get my PhD. Someday I will. I know it's still out there for me. But so yeah, I wasn't going to go to grad school. I was recently divorced. I was in the middle of a pandemic, and I was like, what can I do with all of this time and energy? And so I started bringing food to people who were unsheltered downtown, living at the mitigation site across from the transit center. And I just started building relationships with the folks out there, with the staff who worked at the mitigation site, and learning about this like intersection of incarceration and homelessness as this experience that so many people were facing, and how that lived experience with incarceration was a huge barrier to getting into housing. So I started working with people just one-on-one, and finding that by helping people, I was able to I was watching people get vehicles, get jobs, find housing. And so I was like, this is really making a big difference. So like maybe I could do this on a larger scale. So I started a nonprofit called the Collaborative Association for Reintegration and Education, or CARE for short. And it's knowingly referred to as Care Olympia, because CARE is just, there's too many things called CARE. So one person said Care Olympia and it stuck. So I started an organization doing pretty much similar work to what I was doing at the University of Washington. With my student-led organization was also called CARE. So same name, I just kind of brought it into the community for a more holistic approach at helping people with reentry after incarceration. And that concept kind of evolved over time into this peer counseling program and outreach program for justice-involved youth and young adults. And in 2022, me and my best friend Paige were working on applying for a grant to the Healthcare Authority, the Washington State Healthcare Authority, for peer-based programs. And we applied for CARE, but we didn't have our 501c3 at the time. So we didn't get the grant because you needed organizations had to have a 501c3 status. So we didn't get the grant. We spent tons of time on it. My best friend Paige was really upset that we didn't get it. And I was like, you know what? It's okay. Like, they said that they really liked our application, and it was just 501c3 that we needed. So we can try again. We can do something else. We can do another one. And then tragically, my best friend died in 2022 from an overdose. And that really lit another fire in me to not let the mission that we had together, the vision that we had together, just fizzle out or die. I felt like I had to make it work. Like, all the goals we had talked about, I had to make it work. So at her celebration of life, I read the snippet that she wrote about herself for the grant application. We both had to answer a question about what our accomplishments are and what we're the most proud of ourselves for. And hers was just really beautiful. And I read it during her celebration of life. And somebody approached me from the Clouse tribe and was telling me that hey, the Clouse tribe offers community foundation grants, and you don't have to have 501c3. I really think that the story that you and Paige had together is beautiful, and I would encourage you to apply. So I did, and we ended up receiving $100,000 from the Clouse tribe. And I used the same application that Paige and I wrote. I just edited it to match the application itself. And I was able to get funded with Paige's help. We ultimately did get funded. So that's amazing. And it really kicked things off for CARE. And so that was huge. And then a board member of mine who's a community member encouraged me to really think about how my values might show up in a position of leadership in local government. So that's when I looked into what it would take to run for office. And at first was going to run for city council, but I live in unincorporated Thurston County, so I couldn't run for city council, and I was bummed. But then I realized after looking through, I figured out, hey, the county's going from 3 to 5 seats right now. Like the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners is growing, and I just so happen to live in District 5, one of the new ones.
And this was what year?
This is 2023.
Okay.
Yeah. So 2023, I ran for election, and I was elected by almost 60% of the vote. So that's incredible. And I'm just really blessed because I grew up in this community, and being able to give back to it after going through so much and seeing that people in our community are suffering, and somehow I can use the position of power to help people and make the system work better for people is just something I'm incredibly proud of and very grateful for.
Yeah. So 60% of the vote, that's pretty overwhelming. I'm curious, why do you think it was by such a big margin?
Well, for the general election, that's when I got 60%. I can't remember what percent I got in the primary, but for the general, it was about 60. And I think, well, a lot of it has to do with the makeup of our community, but also the person who was running against me was pretty far right and also didn't have a very coherent platform. And I think, that's a lot of people who voted for my opponent just were going to vote for whoever didn't have the D by their name. So.
Ooh, that's a big one, probably, especially here in Washington State. I would imagine that would be pretty big. And I'm curious too, did you politics before you joined, as far as your idea of it versus now, since you've been in it? Is it what you thought it would be?
It's not. Well, I really didn't know what to expect. I went into this with a super open mind because I really didn't know what to expect. Running a campaign is not the same thing as being in elected office. It's not even close. They're completely separate things. And I didn't know what to expect. So it's, as far as it's definitely not, there have been a lot of surprises. I'll just say that.
Yeah. Is it, I noticed of course, I kind of stalk people that come on the show before they come on. And I was looking at a couple of the Thurston County board meetings. Is that what y'all call them? Board meetings?
Yep. Board meetings and board work sessions. Yeah.
Yeah. I was looking at those, and I was like, damn, man, I wonder what that must feel like. No pun intended, because I know this is called leadership under fire, but literally under fire when everybody else feels a certain type of way and you feel a different way. Is that hard? Because I notice you go against the grain a lot.
I do. Yes. And, as a queer woman, both in the military and now in public office, I've had to learn how to navigate spaces where decision-making power hasn't always been something that includes voices like mine. So I'm very intentional about who gets a voice at the table, because public service isn't about just showing up, but it's about who you're showing up for. So but that does come with being under a lot of fire. You're right. So being relentlessly and unwaveringly for the people comes with a lot of political pressure, because there are interests in the community that come with a lot of force. And so pushing back on those means bringing voices into the room that have never been invited. And so, yeah.
That makes sense. So, hey, and I could be getting this wrong. So the way that I was looking at it, because I'm kind of a kumbaya guy. I like getting along with people unless they're just assholes, and I'm like, we're good. But I was looking at that and looking at a couple of those meetings, and I was just like, damn, I wonder how that must feel sitting with a group of people, collectively they have one idea, and then maybe you have another idea. I was just imagining how lonely that must feel. But now, kind of listening to you and thinking about the big picture of it, it sounds like that it's not lonely at all, because you're actually doing it for the people. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I would say you definitely got that right. I have to stay grounded in why I'm here in the first place, and it requires learning how to separate what is truly about governance from what is about power perception and politics. And so it can definitely be lonely, but I think, that's where like support systems, coping mechanisms, and taking care of ourselves comes into play. And a lot of people in politics don't feel they have time to do that, to like really take care of themselves. And I notice it all around me. So I've made it a point to really care for myself, especially in times where I do feel lonely, because it's a very unique experience. So there's not a lot of people I can call up who are like also progressive elected officials who are like have been under fire in some of the ways I've been under fire. And there's not a lot of people to call to relate to. So it can feel lonely, but by showing up for the people, like I know that's who I answer to, and that's who I'm accountable to. So there's a whole community of over 300,000 people, around me, and that's why I'm here. And so no, it's not really lonely if I think about it that way.
That's dope. I'm curious, who are, if you can name them, who are the elected officials that maybe like you're on the group chat with, where you're like, fuck man, today sucks, or I just read this, or like who are those people?
That's a great question.
That's important, because I asked that question because like no matter who you are or what you do, I realize that you cannot do it alone.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. And I'm very blessed. I have some local elected officials who I can call almost any time. And one of them is Clark Gilman from Olympia City Council, who introduced me to an amazing group called Local Progress. It's a nationwide group for local elected officials. And they have created so many opportunities to come together. In fact, I'm going to an affordable housing convening tomorrow and Saturday. It's a 2-day convening with Local Progress, actually in Seattle, luckily, because it's a nationwide group, so they don't do a lot in Washington specifically. So I'll be able to hang out with all my peers this week. But Local Progress has several programs, one of which I went through, which is called the Local Elected Leadership Institute. And it was a partnership with SAGE Leaders, where we did a couple days in Seattle with a cohort of local elected officials across the state of Washington. So now I have a bigger network of elected officials all throughout the state and country that I can turn to. And I do that quite often, because there are several local electeds here in Thurston County that I can really count on to call up when times are hard. But there's also political pressures that local electeds are facing that can sometimes be difficult to talk about, because, well, number one, I can't talk to more than one of my seatmates at a time, because that's a serial meeting. Number two, sometimes I have to be careful which other elected officials I'm talking to, because if we serve on a committee together that's external from the commissioners, that could be a serial meeting for whatever board we sit on together. So there's that. And then just, I don't always want to call someone who's local, because I do have to work with people professionally. So I can't share too much about my personal life with local electeds here in Thurston County. So having peers who have been in similar situations that are outside Thurston County has really helped. It's made all the difference. And it's really helped me feel less alone, because being like what would we consider the most progressive person on your body can be very challenging and lonely unless you have other people to talk to who have been in that exact same position. So I'm really, really blessed to have that group to lean on.
Oh, that's awesome. That makes me feel good, knowing that it's not that the things that you're doing or not doing, that you're not operating inside of a vacuum. I think about that about all of our leaders. Like, man, I wonder what that must feel like. I wonder what they must be going through. I wonder how they're coping. And it sounds like community is a big part of that coping strategy for you. I know the folks that are listening to this, I know they're like, oh, you got to ask about the settlement. You got to ask about the settlement, because that is one of the hottest topics in our community right now. And I'm curious, in your own words, if you feel like going there, what happened during that season that led to the county settlement?
Yeah. So what happened? Oh yeah, we'll just rip it right off. We'll just go straight into it.
Yeah,
no, that's no problem. I have been saying, a lot of people haven't come to me directly with questions, but like they've sure said a lot to other people or online or anonymously on Reddit. And it's like, I'm always open to questions. Like I've told people, you can always talk to me. I'm not going to shy away from questions, because talking about what happened is important. And it's an opportunity for accountability too when I'm asked a direct question. And so, you know, I will say like what happened leading up to it, some of it is like personal, that I won't go into personal details, but I will say that I was in a really vulnerable time in my life. And um, yeah, so for many reasons, personally, professionally, my, executive aide that I had was not working out for a variety of reasons. And I wanted, I even checked my judgment on that. I was like, hey, do you feel like this working relationship's working out? And people were like, oh no, I think you might need to think about getting a different executive aide. And that was really difficult.
Like a performance thing?
It was, a lot of people know who my executive aides have been, and I don't want to say anything that might be, difficult for someone else in their professional life, but it just wasn't a good fit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just wasn't a good fit, and I wasn't getting the product I needed out of the requests I was making in terms of I need you to write this kind of a letter, and so it just wasn't a good fit.
Okay.
But yeah, but nothing, it wasn't a character thing. Like we actually, my first executive aide is an awesome person. It wasn't a character thing at all. It was just not a good working fit. So, yeah, but I was horrified over this idea of having to fire somebody. I couldn't really figure out how to deal with that because I hate letting people down. And, watching how this, it's a solid position, it pays well, watching somebody go from having a stable position to I'm the decision maker that puts them out of that. I just couldn't really handle that. It really bothered me. And so I was losing sleep at night over having to let somebody go and not knowing how to do it. And so yeah, I was just really struggling with that. And then I was going through stuff in my personal life too that was really, really difficult. I had a partner who was in treatment and in recovery, and we had to take some time to kind of figure out what that meant for our future. And so during this time where I was in a really vulnerable situation, somebody who I knew who had a working relationship with me from CARE, they were actually on my board of directors for CARE. They kind of came forward and were like, hey, first of all, asking me, are you single? Do you want to be single? And I was like, you know what? Yeah, I want to be single right now. And then started asking me if I would hire them, because they became aware of me. I was letting my close friends know, hey, this isn't working out with my executive aide. I'm really nervous about hiring because I took a lot of time hiring my first person, and I really thought I got it right. I had second interviews, I had people on an interview panel with me, and it just was really hard to find the right person. And turns out it's not the right fit. So I was really nervous about trying to go through that process again and hire somebody new. And so I decided to go with someone I knew and someone who I'd worked with well. And so I decided to hire somebody who I knew and had worked with before. In the weeks leading up to that decision, though, we had become romantically involved, very lightly romantically involved. We had gone on 2 dates. And so then this person approaches me asking for me to consider them in this role. And so the conditions that led up to it were just, a lot of vulnerability and not a lot of capacity to really think about all of the components that go into this. So, and I'm a pretty analytical thinker with a lot of things. So my form of being analytical in my thinking during this vulnerable period in my life was well, if I'm going to hire you and we've become romantically involved, I need to make sure that I'm not breaking any policies. So I looked up all the county policies, every HR policy. I looked through the whole entire policy manual. I looked at county codes. I looked at state laws. I looked at all the RCWs. I looked at everything I could about public employees and relationships. And there was nothing. I couldn't find anything that related to this situation. And then talking with staff at the county, I didn't disclose that I was, romantically involved with this person, but I did ask, is there a policy on hiring people we know? And, I got the general pretty decent HR advice that, like, if you're going to hire someone, you need to take into consideration, like, having a working relationship is not the same thing as whatever personal relationship you've had with them leading up to that. And I'm like, okay, got it. And so, that's kind of leading up to it, like kind of how it happened. And a lot of people don't know that side. I mean, I'm not out sharing those details, but I will answer direct questions when I'm asked. So.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is you asked them, but you kind of didn't ask them, like, as far as like the situation, like 100%, like this somebody I'm romantically or could be romantically involved with, but just somebody that I know.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what I was asking staff. Yeah. While making the decision. And then, like, in the background, I'm also looking up all these policies and trying to find something, and I couldn't find anything. So.
Okay. So what, and if you could go there, like what happened as far as the settlement itself?
Mm-hmm.
Like as far as like what happened, as far what you can share, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, like, the settlement itself, well, I guess I'll back up just a little bit, because I think something that's important for the public to know that most people don't know is that the relationship quickly became one that was not safe. It was not what it looked like from even the outside as the settlement kind of came to light. The relationship was extremely, I don't know, I really feel people deserve the full picture when they're deciding, like, what kind of person I am. And
I agree.
It was a relationship that became incredibly toxic at a rapid pace. And like I said, I was in a position in my life where things didn't feel clear. Like, I didn't really know. I mean, I was going through something with my partner of 3 years at the time, now going on 6. And we were in a position where, like, for the first time in our relationship, we were trying to figure out, like, what, are we going to have a future together, or do we need to part ways, and just be friends or whatever, And so I was, like, entering into this romantic situation with this person who, I actually, looking back, like, did not have my best interests at heart, had a former settlement with a former employer, and so has done this before, and kind of swooped in at a time where they saw a window of vulnerability, and, started out by being very sweet, and then started repeatedly asking if we're dating over and over, like, every day asking me if we're dating, and me saying no, we're not dating, and really pushing back. And I showed all of these messages to the investigator. I let them look through my entire phone. And the other person gave a USB drive of selective text messages or whatever they wanted to share, while I shared everything I had, which is why the report is so heavily weighed in the way it is, where it's, the way it's written it can't be like 100% factual, because that's what a judge decides. But the way that the report is written it is more likely than not that Emily is telling the truth here, 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 and here. And it was everything. I was telling the truth about everything, because I approached this with, like, brutal, painful honesty from the beginning. And that vulnerable honesty, that level of honesty, actually backfired in a lot of ways, because I was honest with my colleagues in executive sessions about, like, specifics of the relationship and how bad and how dangerous it was. And that was, that information got out to the public and was weaponized against me. People said that I had made claims of, like, sexual assault, and then I took those claims back. I never took those claims back. The relationship was very dangerous. It was something where I was, forced to let go of friends and stop talking to family members, and I couldn't say anything, or things got violent. And that's the part people don't know. And that's the part that I don't feel like I can talk about publicly. And so I appreciate you giving me this chance to kind of come here and talk with you about this, because I do think the public deserves to know. And I think that the public deserves this context, because, like, I'm being asked still to this day, like, how are you going to take accountability for this? And, accountability is a huge and very important part of the process. I made a big mistake by like opening up an opportunity for the county to be seen in a poor light, because ultimately what I want to do is rebuild trust between the government and the community.
Mm.
That trust has not been there. I don't think we could ever say definitively that there has ever been trust between the community and the government. And it's gotten so much worse now. And my job is to try to restore that and to show that there is a level of humanity in leadership, and that it is possible to have leaders with the capacity to care about the people over anything else, over any special interests or monetary interests. And that's what this county and community deserves. And my first year of office was really difficult, and the public didn't get to see the full picture. So I'm like eternally grateful to the people who did take the time to come and ask me directly and be there for me. But my honesty with my colleagues is how I value honesty and integrity. And so I never once was dishonest during this whole process. So I just wanted to kind of say a little bit about that before jumping into like the settlement piece itself, because I didn't want to miss that opportunity to share as much as I could about the relationship itself and the pieces that like people in the public don't see and that the media never saw, because I wasn't in a place, due to like the legal being a legal situation, I wasn't in a place to say very much at all. And even if I could, I don't think that I would have said that, because it takes a toll on you to be in a relationship like that, and especially with a person I considered a friend. And I was very worried about that person, like throughout the process of the investigation, and like hoping they're okay and wondering like where's their mind at right now. Like I couldn't really believe it that someone I knew and trusted was doing all of this and making things up of such significant nature. I just didn't understand what was going on. So it was really a hard time. But then the settlement piece comes along, and I abstained from a lot of those conversations. So I wasn't in most of those conversations. But before
you get to that part, and I have to ask, what part, like just for the folks that don't know, that didn't do a deep dive like I did, that didn't stalk you. I probably shouldn't have said stalk.
That's okay. That's part of the job, at least this job.
For the folks that didn't do that research or don't know, or someplace else that are not in Thurston County, what exactly was that person accusing you of, and what part was false, or what part actually was true?
Yeah. So it changed a little bit from the first time I heard that there was a complaint. The first time I heard that there was a complaint made against me, it was for sexual harassment, retaliation, and discrimination. And ultimately, I think what got filed that was being put before the board was retaliation and discrimination. I believe they took the sexual harassment piece out of the official claim. I could be wrong about that, but I know that sexual harassment was one of the accusations initially. And I think in the end, we were just looking at claims of retaliation and discrimination. So yeah, those were, and it was retaliation for filing a complaint. That's what they were claiming. Oh, and you asked which parts were true?
Yeah. So retaliation from him filing a complaint against you, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then what part was true? Is that was your second question?
Yeah.
So
I want to say I appreciate you for opening up and talking about this. I know that it's not freaking easy.
That's okay. Yeah, no, I'm happy to have the opportunity, because like I said, I mean, when I'm out in the public, people are asking me about this, and they'll continue to ask me about it. And that's okay, because it's public, and that's part of the price of being a public official. But whenever I say, hey, you can follow up with any questions, no one follows up with questions. Like almost nobody ever asks me direct questions. So having the opportunity is something I actually appreciate, because I wish people felt like they could ask me, but yeah.
Well, it's awkward. You know what I mean? Even me, I feel, I don't know, like the human in me is like, look, this ain't none of my business. You know what I mean? But I do know that you are a public official, and these are things that affect the reason, affect people voting, and people want to be able to have that, to continue to have that trust. So it's important. I don't know, I just want to recognize that. Like, I appreciate you for being open and communicating the way that you are, because I know it's not easy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I appreciate that.
Right.
Yeah. So like, yeah, the claim itself, actually, none of it that was true. None of it. Like, there was no sexual harassment on my side, on my behalf. There was no discrimination and no retaliation. And so none of that was true, actually.
Mm.
But the commissioners latched on to the fact that we were in a relationship, and that part was true. And when I was asked about that by one of my seatmates, I immediately said yes. And the question that I was asked in executive session was, do you have a relationship with this person outside of work? Or I think it was, did you have a relationship with this person outside of work? And I immediately said yes. But that could have meant anything. In this situation, it meant we were considered ourselves to be dating for about a period of maybe 6 weeks. And it was a dangerous relationship. But of course, I didn't say any of that. I just answered the question. It was a yes or no question. And yes, we did have a relationship outside of work. And as soon as I answered that question honestly, trust had just evaporated between me and my seatmates. It was just gone. And I can't even, I wasn't in their shoes, but I can imagine hearing one of my seatmates say something like that. And just, I could imagine feeling devastated. Like, what is this going to do to the county? But, I'm not going to try to figure out what other people were thinking. I'm just, thinking, gosh, that would have been hard for them too. But like, trust just evaporated. And so there was nothing else that I could say throughout the duration of the entire process that would have held any credibility with them. And that was unfortunate, because despite making a mistake, I always wanted to collaborate on how we can make things better. And I always wanted to provide honesty to them if they were to have questions. But they didn't have, it's kind of like what we're saying, it's awkward to talk about. It's awkward to ask questions. And so I'm sure being, for my seatmates, it was probably impossible. And then, when you think litigation and you're an elected official, like, people just don't, it's a wise decision in most litigation related cases to just not say anything to anyone, but it's definitely considered to be wise to not talk to the person who's accused of doing something wrong. So I can see that they were in a tough position. But for me, it was just like, come on, guys, like, none of the claim is true. Like, none of this is true. There was no retaliation. There was no discrimination. And there was absolutely no sexual harassment. And that's when I disclosed to them, like, in fact, on the flip side, and I kind of shared, more than what I would say in a podcast, in a public podcast, but I definitely regretted being honest with them, because it backfired and caused them to just, there was just no trust. And so
You feel like they took what you said out of context?
I wouldn't necessarily say out of context, because, like, it's true. I did have a relationship outside of work. I just feel like they filled in a lot of gaps that were filled out inaccurately. Like, there were narratives that people were constructing. We're human. We do that. That's a normal, that's normal human behavior. If we don't know all the information, we're going to try to figure it out or fill in the gaps where we can. And I think that there were probably 0 gaps filled that actually were the truth. And I don't say that to, like, rag on my seatmates. I say that because the information wasn't there, and it wasn't possible for them to know the truth. It wasn't possible for them to know that this was an abusive relationship, or that, I was forced to, like, kick people out of my life and not talk to people and isolate myself and all these things. Like, they didn't have that information. So any assumptions that they could have made about what I meant when I said yes to that question just couldn't have been true. And so I don't think they took it out of context, but I think they added a lot of their own context, just because that's what we do as humans. And I don't blame them for it, but it's unfortunate that it happened that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I know there are a lot of feelings behind that. Especially like with your seatmates. I was watching the other night where one of the commissioners had made a statement, and it was pretty fiery. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I was just thinking, like, I wonder how you must have felt sitting there
Yeah.
listening to that. I think her name is Carolina Mita. Is that how you say her name?
Um, Carolina Mejia.
Mejia. Mejia. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you were going to ask about that. And I, well, so was the question like how I felt about it? Was that the question?
Yeah. How you felt
Yeah.
about it, and I know that there was race brought up
Hmm.
into that, and I was just curious what part of how did you feel,
Hmm.
and where did the race part come from? Because I was like, am I missing
Hmm.
something else? Was there something else that was connected to
Yeah.
this that I didn't see?
Right. Yeah. And that's the question a lot of people asked. And Carolina Mejia is very well known, very well respected in the community for a lot of great reasons. And when I saw somebody make a post, I think there was a newspaper article that about that or something, and there was a post someone made on Facebook, and I started seeing other elected officials for the first time in a lot of circumstances, like speaking up about what was going on, where a
Mm.
lot of people were silent, and then this article was posted about the comments that were made, and then other elected officials started coming forward and saying, hey, Carolina is a person of color and she's saying this, we should be listening. And I really tend to agree with that line of thinking, like, hey, if a person of color is talking about issues impacting people of color, we should definitely listen. And so I think that it's important to do that. um, and it was really hard, right? Like hearing some of those comments and not understanding how they fit the context of what was going on, but also feeling like it's not my place to question, like why why she might feel that way about the
Mm.
situation. um
I was thinking maybe the other person that was involved, the person that you work with, were they a person of color?
They were, yes, they were
Okay.
Asian American. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
Okay.
that was like the obvious thing about it was like, okay, well, we're talking about people of color. The person, I think that she referred to that person as the victim in the situation, which that was kind of painful for me to hear. But I could, that was the narrative that was being painted, and I didn't have any room to talk more about what had happened to me in the relationship after I shared the first time, and it backfired, and it got leaked to the public. And I was like, okay, so I guess I shouldn't be honest with the board then about like what really happened, because they don't believe me anyways. And so to hear someone who I have a lot of respect for, like I really have a lot of respect for Carolina, and um, hearing, and I actually asked Carolina to swear me in, when the county auditor is historically has always been the person that swears in new elected officials. But me and Carolina have a platform, or I guess I should say, like our political values align quite often. She's got great policy ideas, and we align on so many things. And so to like have someone that I respect and looked up to during my campaign say those things, it really hurt. Um, of course, I didn't want her to feel that way about me, but I also didn't feel like it was right for me to like have any doubts about what she was saying or feeling. I was in a position where I was like, you know what, like I feel like I should be listening to her in this situation because she's speaking passionately about something. And but I just don't see the connection aside from the fact that the person who made the complaint is a person of color. And some of the comments that were made were pretty like true, societally speaking. I think like there was a comment in there about like black and brown bodies laying dead in the street, and I'm just like, I'm like, I don't know, it was pretty disorienting for me, because like that's something that I'm fighting for, is like for us to not have a society that continues to have such a dark reality.
Mm.
And to hear someone say that, someone who I have a lot of respect for, like say those things, it was pretty hard. And um, I just felt like I wanted to do something to like help the situation. Like I in the moment I'm like, gosh, like is there like what have I done, is kind of what I was asking myself. I was like, what have I done to cause this? Like how is this possible? So it was just like a pretty like disorienting experience.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a very human response. I was thinking, as I was reading one of the articles, there was a comment made that you had said something about, I think it was like Asian American, um, something derogatory, and I was wondering,
Mm-hmm.
maybe if it came from that, or if you wanted to clear that part up too,
Yeah.
because if I'm voting and I'm a part of that population and I read that, I would be like, I don't know. So I was curious if you wanted to clear
Mm-hmm.
that part up.
Yeah, and I don't know like which part. So I know that in the report, the investigative report, it may have mentioned it, but um, the the piece about the Asian American Pacific Islander thing was like we have a Asian American Pacific Islander Month proclamation, and so the Board of County Commissioners celebrates Asian American Pacific Islander Month, and because the employee was Asian American, they would frequently make comments like, "Oh, I don't have to do that. It's AAPI month," and as like kind of a joke, and um, but they said it a lot, like every single day of the month, and just at first it was kind of like, "Oh, okay," like haha, but then over and over and over and over, and it became like a theme, and that somehow got into the report, like something about me making derogatory comments about AAPI month, but that was not ever anything that I would have done. So, or I never said anything derogatory about AAPI month, but I think that was why it made itself in there.
Mm.
The report was full of a lot of stuff that just like was not true at all. So,
It was like almost like it was like compounding kind of, and I'll be honest. I mean, there have been situations where Black History Month, where I'd be like, well, yeah, well, we're a mixed household here. Well, I'll say, well, I'm not doing that. It's Black History Month,
yeah,
like
yeah,
like kind of as a joke or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's yeah. It sounds like there was a lot of compiling onto that, and so that's why I was curious about that part, and I
Mhm.
wanted to ask you, what is like, what do you want the public to understand that they might not know about this situation? Like, and to put it into context, like if you're at home, you're looking at the comments, you're looking at all the shit that's being said, and you're just like, I just really wish they would know this.
I think, like I said it, I think like that was the main thing I wanted people to know is that, like, I mean, I guess I could take a couple steps further. Like when we're talking about women in relationships that are abusive, uh,
Mm-hmm.
I really, one thing I think I would want the public to know is that there was a part of me at first when this happened that immediately jumped to like, oh my gosh, like I need to say something and be outspoken about this because this relationship was abusive. I was assaulted. And like so many women go through that every day and they don't get to say anything. Like it'll put them in more danger to actually say something. And I'm in a position of power where if I said something, I could set an example for women who are going through something similar to say something. And like I could, even it could even be an example for how our court system used to work when we had domestic violence advocates helping people fill out protection orders, but those positions don't exist anymore, unfortunately. But like there was a part of me that was like, gosh, as hard as this is going to be, like I'm going to have to go public with what really happened because I
Mm-hmm.
want women to know that it is possible to say something and come to some sort of solution. But I was talked out of that approach by somebody at the county, and
As far as going public.
yeah, to take that approach of like they were like, you definitely shouldn't do that. You shouldn't go on the offensive. I can't really remember what the conversation was, but I do remember being advised to not take that approach, but also like being advised to share the specific like incident that happened with the board because it was an important detail. So I did take that advice and didn't approach it in a way of like trying to help, women feel empowered to speak up when they're going through stuff. And I also took the advice of sharing with the board what I shared, and it backfired. So that all around was bad advice, I think, looking back. But I just wish people know that like my natural inclination was to like be honest, be brave, be accountable, learn from my mistakes, and help contribute to a solution. And for me, part of that felt like it should include a level of like honesty and transparency with the public about what really happened to me. But then I was like conflicted because at the same time, like I'm thinking, well, I don't want to play the victim. Like I don't want to do that either. Like, but through the process of the investigation, it was actually really helpful for me to show the investigator everything in my phone, because it showed like the types of comments that I was taking from somebody that were completely inappropriate that I didn't see at the time. And a lot of women do find themselves in relationships, and men, you know, and people in general can find themselves in relationships where we don't understand that we are in an abusive situation until later or ever. Some people don't ever realize it. And I certainly didn't. Like, this was someone I trusted and didn't think of them as, you know, this kind of a person. So in the moment, I didn't see that it was, you know, the type of relationship it was. And it wasn't until I had an investigator looking through my phone with me saying like, hey, why didn't you break up at that point? Why didn't you fire him when he like intentionally drove off the road with you in the car, like screaming at you because you shared that you were in a relationship with him? Like, those are the kinds of things that were happening. And
that's what an investigator asked you that question.
Yes, she asked me why I didn't like cut things off in those moments. And I just felt very stupid. You know, I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know why I didn't stop it then, or like when it got worse, or, you know, and it's just like, I felt like I had blinders on. So looking back, it does feel very stupid, but I don't think that I should feel stupid about that, because a lot of women, like I said, and people, but just when you're in that kind of a situation, it's really hard to see it for what it is, especially if you trust and care about somebody. And you don't see them as that kind of a person. It can feel impossible to really see what's going on until someone else who's looking at it says something.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate you for going there. How are you feeling?
Oh, I'm good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what, you know, after all of this, what did this cost you personally? I'm talking about like your reputation, relationships, mental health, identity. What would you think would be the biggest thing that jumps out?
I would say, like, personally, the situation, like politically for me and personally, it forced me to decide very quickly and early on in my first year of office whether I'm leading from my values or reacting to pressure. And I had to make that decision early on. Am I going to get through this by leading with my values and focusing on the reason I'm here, which is the people of Thurston County, or am I going to react to this pressure? So I didn't read the Facebook comments. I didn't look at the Facebook posts. People sent me screenshots and stuff, but I didn't look at the comments because I knew that if I did, I would just be adding pressure onto myself in a situation that's already extremely difficult, and I'd rather focus on the community. And so, yeah, I guess for me, just like staying clear on why I'm here, reminding myself, like, I didn't run for this position to be comfortable or to be liked by people. I ran to serve the community and push for systems that work better for people. So even when it's difficult, I focus on showing up with integrity and being accountable for my actions and continuing to do the work.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you say that, because that was my next question. Because I did a poll where I asked people in the community, and how are you doing on time?
Oh, I'm good.
Good. Okay. I did a poll, and I got some really good questions, but one of the questions were, you know, out of, you know, how can she still, you know, how could she not resign after all of this? And, you know, what type of person would still run for re-election after all of that? Can you speak to that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There was a lot of pressure to resign, including from some of my seatmates and local electeds in the area, and people, and even people who endorsed me. People were emailing and calling, and there was a lot of pressure to resign. And I did wonder, I was like, should I, how did I feel about the idea of resigning? And honestly, there wasn't, so I had a lot of people in my corner, and I was really blessed and fortunate. And my attorney that was helping me through the case, I think I told her a couple times, I have to resign. I can't do this because people don't believe in me and they deserve a commissioner that they believe in. And she had to remind me, hey, you are currently in the thick of it. It's going to get worse before it gets better, but it will get better. And people will forget about this. And, I had people around me, luckily, who were helping me see the future, see the light at the end of the tunnel through one of the darkest times in my life. And that was extremely helpful, and really putting it into context for me, having people around me who could put it into that context for me, because I'm the one going through it. So I'm gonna, I had some very dark days. I had some very, very dark days that I'm very grateful that I had made it through. But I couldn't have done all of that without, not resigned without having those people put it into context for me. Hey, you will regret it if you resign, because you will look back and regret doing that, especially knowing what really happened. People who knew what really happened to me, they were like, you will regret it, because you will come to see that what you did wasn't something that should disqualify you as a public official. You have what it takes. You got 60% of the vote. I had people reminding me, people believe in you, you can't give up. And that was very helpful. And I had to immediately, like I said earlier, I had to focus on why I ran in the first place. And so coming to terms with why am I here? People put me here. People elected me. If they don't like what I'm doing for the county, or they don't feel like I'm working for them, they can elect somebody else, or, in the future. So that's really, democracy is how we get people elected. And I didn't want to give up on this community, because this community is worth it to me, to make it through hard things and not give up. And I made a mistake, and so I had to own up to that. But it didn't mean that it was worth throwing away everything that people elected me for. And that vision is still there. Those values are still there. And I never stopped doing the work. Even when I was taken off my external committees, I showed up to every external committee meeting so I didn't fall behind. This community is worth all of that and more. And so I didn't resign, and I am running for re-election because people deserve somebody who understands how power operates within institutions. And through this experience, I've learned a lot about that. I've learned who gets protected, who gets scrutinized, and how quickly narratives can take hold. And, that awareness has actually made me more intentional about how I show up with others, because I know firsthand how damaging it can be when public platforms are used in ways that sidestep accountability or escalate harm rather than resolve it. So I try to lead, and I continue to lead in a way that creates space for disagreement, while also not running into dehumanization of others, because we can't do effective public service if we're undermining each other in the process. So my focus is really on how do we move forward as a team? The dust has settled a bit. We're working together better. We're having more meetings. I'm meeting with commissioners more often, and building that trust back, and actively and openly still being vulnerable with my seatmates. We just had a board retreat the other day, and one of the questions at the end was, how are you going to contribute to a high functioning board? And I was like, I'll go first. I'm trying to rebuild trust with everybody. I'm trying to rebuild trust with my seatmates. I'm working on that every day. I show up to the room with the understanding or belief that each person there is showing up with the intention to serve. And that helps me go into the room without judgment of others, and just really go into the room trying to be the best policymaker I can for the public. And so I know it's kind of a long-winded answer, but
nice. Perfect.
Yeah.
How did you get to this point, mental health wise? Because I didn't hear you say it, but it's something that I'm picking up. I feel like I heard you say that your mental health was suffering during that time. How did you get? Is that true?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so how did you get from that point to where you're at right now? Because what I'm hearing you saying is that you're focused on the job, you're focused on winning back the trust from not only your seatmates but from the community.
Yeah. So I developed a thick skin when I was in the military. And now I say I've developed calloused skin by being in the public service as a commissioner, because thick skin got me pretty far, but now it's even thicker because going through all of that was pretty difficult. But I am the type of person who makes a decision on how I'm going to approach a situation, and then I stick with that decision. And I decided to approach this situation with a focus on the community. And so when I was having like some of the darkest days, like honestly, sometimes like I really had to think about like who I have in my life and why they're important to me, and like
Mhm.
who really gets me through the day, and like who am I here for at the end of the day if I don't have anyone else. And so I had to kind of have those discussions and just really self-reflect a lot, because there were some days that were really hard. And like in the midst of all of that, we actually did this is kind of funny. We did a proclamation on social isolation and loneliness being a public health crisis. And the Board of Health did this proclamation while everybody was treating me this way. And I was just like, this is kind of interesting, like to see how much we're saying we value the idea that like isolation needs to be addressed, but I'm like being pushed out from and not being checked on. Like people who knew I wasn't safe, they weren't checking in on me at work. I mean, like people professionally within the office who knew that like I was getting death threats. I was getting people driving by my house, driving up my driveway. I have a very long private driveway. So anyone driving up is either like DoorDash delivery or lost or something malicious and weird.
Mm-hmm.
And so people were driving all the way up my driveway, and I live in an ADU on my parents' property. So
Mm-hmm.
my parents are just up the hill from me, and I'm very protective over my family. So I was pretty scared, and like was sharing some of this stuff with like in my one-on-ones with the county manager and other, whenever I could, whenever I had a meeting and this came up, I would share like, hey, I'm feeling pretty fearful right now. Like I've got all this stuff going on, and not one person checked on me. And yeah, not one person asked if I was okay. So I'm very grateful that I have such an amazing family. I have such amazing friends. And, I had my dog, Max. He was the best dog ever. He actually, he passed away. So he wasn't around for all of this. Sadly, he would have been a great help. But yeah, I mean, like it really was my friends and family that got me through a lot of it, and just a lot of like resilience. And I have a pretty good like understanding of how to handle mental health issues, because like I said earlier, when I was a teenager I struggled with anxiety, and like I had some mental health stuff just based on what I experienced growing up with my parents not being there. And like and being a queer person in a Christian school, that was really fun. That was a lot. So I've had therapy. I've got PTSD from the military. I'm a disabled veteran and have luckily utilized the services available to me. So I do have a lot of skills in how to get through difficult situations, and I lean on those skills and build on them all the time. And now I'm at the point where like I'm even doing fun things for my mental health, which was a part that I never really seemed to have time for. But like I've been rock climbing. I adopted 7 tadpoles, and now they're frogs, and so I watched them grow up and that kind of stuff. Honestly, it might sound like you see the frogs behind me.
Yeah,
like,
one of your frogs, kimchi and
wasabi.
Wasabi, that's so cool.
Yeah, I have 7 of them. They're my little sushi rolls. They all have like I've got tofu, kimchi, wasabi. I still don't have names for a few of them because I can't tell them all apart yet. But yeah.
No, that's dope. I think that's an important, and that was going to be my next question. Like, for other leaders that feel like they're under fire, feel like they're lonely, what are some things that you recommend that they start doing right now? Because that's, here, Thurston County, that's one thing, but my goal ultimately is to use this interview to give it to people, leaders that are hurting, leaders that are alone, leaders that feel misunderstood, leaders that, maybe they fucked up, but still deserve another chance,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What do you say? What do you think that they should do right now if they're feeling that?
Oh gosh. I would say, like, the first thing I would say is what people told me when I was going through the thick of it, which is like, don't give up on yourself because you will regret that in the future. We are all worthy of redemption. And the one thing someone told me that really stuck with me was like, the only thing people love more than a success story is a redemption story. And that was very powerful to me. And someone I like am very close with and love very much told me that, and it really stuck. And um, so I would say, like, yeah, you like, don't give up on yourself is the first thing. And then you have to find community. And that's not always easy. If it's like for elected officials specifically, I would encourage them to join local progress, because that's what helped me in many cases where I was feeling alone. And we talked about it a little bit earlier, but progressive elected officials, even if you're not super progressive, you can come on in. We're not going to exclude you. We'll maybe help you see the light also. But there are, and there are groups to get involved with locally. And like, for me, it was family, but not everyone has that, so the answer is different for everyone, because some people don't have access to the resources that I have access to. I'm very privileged to be able to like be resourced enough to get through something so difficult, and not everyone has that. But like, if you're sharing this and there's someone who's like listening and none of these suggestions that I'm giving feel relevant, then I would even encourage people, like, you can reach out to me directly and I will be there. Like, will I will be there for people if they feel alone, no matter what their situation is. And if I can get them help, like finding a group or like getting access to resources so that they can get through it too, like I would love to do that, because everybody deserves to be cared about.
I agree. Especially when something has happened that may or may not be favorable to the public. I agree. Nobody deserves to be alone, and that's a lot of times what I think about. Even with your in your situation, I didn't even know you, but I'm just like, I wonder what she's going through.
Yeah.
This must be hard. And
Yeah.
so for the listeners and the viewers, what I'm gathering, and correct me if I'm wrong, community, family, finding interest in different hobbies. It don't have to necessarily be frogs, but
Frogs are a good one though.
yeah, no, I love that. I'm sitting here in my office, and as you're talking, I'm thinking, and kind of circling the wagons in my head. I got a garden over here. That's something that I started doing when I was struggling with my mental health, feeling the isolation, and gardening and running and walking.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing for me was community as well. So I appreciate you saying that. Do you got some time to take some questions from the community?
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
can do like a rapid fire with some of the questions. I'll go with my question first.
Okay.
Before we switch gears, is there anything else that I might have left on the table as far as the subject of the scrutiny that you faced in that whole ordeal? Is there anything that you're like, man, I wish you would ask me this, Tony? You said that you were going to ask me this, but you didn't. Is there something else that you're just like, I don't know. Yeah. What else?
Yeah, there's two things. Okay, so the first one was one of the questions that I thought you were going to ask me was, what does that do? So in relation to the reality of like having colleagues go against me publicly, and what does that do to a leader's mindset and how you continue to show up for the people when the room feels small? And my answer was, I get out of the room. And
okay.
Yeah, and in the case of what happened in 2024, I had to pivot because like where I lost all of my credibility in the room did feel very small, because I would try to bring a policy idea forward or a budget idea or a program or something like, and nothing felt like it was even being heard. Like nothing felt like it was being heard. So I was like, you know what? I'm here to be a policymaker. And if I can't be a policymaker, what am I going to do? So I decided to pivot and focus on the community and like, how do I empower community members to navigate local government and civic engagement so that they can get stuff done? Because if I can't get something done, I need to teach people how to do it. So I started teaching people how to do that. And that was very powerful. And one example is like a community-led an effort to like establish a quiet zone out at the Atchison Road Railroad crossing at Pattison Lake. And it might seem like a small thing to people who have no idea what a quiet zone is, but like it's when the train horn doesn't blow the horn, and then you have other safety measures in place, like the rails that come down, the lights. That was something that this community's been asking for years, even before I became a commissioner. And they're in my district. Pattison Lake is my district. So this is a community that I became very close with. I go to all their picnics. I go to all their events. I speak at their events, talk about the quiet zone. And they felt for a long time like nothing was going to happen on this because the county kept saying, no, there's too much liability. There's too much risk. Well, I'm super proud to say that just a week ago, we finally approved the not the quiet zone itself, but the moving forward with a diagnostic review so that we can figure out what actually would be needed so that we can start answering these questions about liability and risk. That was a completely community-led effort, and I just facilitated the process of like navigating the system. So I'm really proud of that because like back in 2024, I started working with, actually 2023, it was the end of 2023, I started working with people and like they got something done and they're really excited. And so that was one thing I thought you were gonna ask. And then one more thing quickly is that this one's for my mom. Okay, she's been begging me to say this, and I've never had a place where I felt like it would be appropriate to say this. So I'm gonna say it for my mom. I hope you're listening, Mom. This independent investigation exonerated me of wrongdoing. I'm confident that I didn't break any laws, oaths, or written policies. And I would have defended that position in court had we gone to court. Mm-hmm. The county carries insurance for these kinds of things. So many, they made the business decision to settle rather than litigate, which is a decision the county made. But the report itself exonerated me from any wrongdoing. And the only thing that was found at the end was that I made an ethical mistake. And that's what was found. And so I just wanted to say that for my mom because she begs me to say it everywhere I go. And of course, I'm not going to say that in public settings, but this felt like a good opportunity to like finally give her what she's been asking me for.
Why do you feel like she's so adamant about you getting that out? I got a feeling why. Yeah.
She loves me. She loves me and she wants the community to know the truth. And she has to see what people say online. She's not like me. She reads the comments and she's got friends who call her and she really cares about my reputation because she believes in me. And she doesn't want people to see me in this way that is not true. So yeah, she wants me to run out there and tell everyone. But I think for me, it's like, people have to see it through my actions. Like I've learned what it feels like to not be trusted. And if I just run out and say I'm exonerated of wrongdoing and people don't trust me, then I'm only going to like erode trust further by saying something that people don't believe. But my mom knows it's true. So she really wants me to say it. And I would rather show people through my actions, but I had to say it for my mom.
I think that's important. I love that you said show people through your actions.
Yeah.
Because I mean, people are going to be talking about this, probably as long as you keep running, it'll be, well, this happened or that happened, or, and I'm sure that I'll, get a little pushback, because, I wasn't freaking crucifying, but I think that everybody freaking deserves a second chance. And I'm curious, what would you say, like, end of the story, like, I take full accountability for this because this is actually what I did wrong. What would you think that would be?
It was hiring somebody that I had a romantic relationship with, and it opened the county up to liability. And that's exactly what we faced. We faced a lot of liability and it cost the county money. but that's where I would stop. And I would even probably stop a little earlier because like people love to talk about the money thing. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, taxpayer dollars are incredibly important and we are elected to be stewards of those dollars. So I totally get that. But sometimes I do see comments or someone will send me a screenshot and it's like, is she going to pay back the $300,000? And I just want to say, I promise you guys, I promise everybody, I have worked so many more hours than I'm probably expected to. I promise you, if you add it up, I've paid it back. I mean, I probably work 60 to 80 hours a week. And I love this community. So a lot of what I do, I don't consider it to be work, but I try to bring as much value as I can because that's what people deserve. So
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up, like
mhm,
the $300,000 part and paying that back.
mhm.
I had saw somewhere where somebody was like, oh, it's actually not $300,000. It was more like $700,000. Where did that number come from?
I'm not sure where that number came from.
You
The
heard that
settlement
too?
was that?
Have you heard that too? The
No,
whole
I've heard similar stuff. Like I've heard people throw out like, "Oh, it was actually $1 million," and it's
Mhm.
like I don't know where you are getting that info, but what we get every week is something called a voucher list, which is hundreds of pages of every line item transaction the county has ever made, and these are public record. They go into the meeting packets for our business meetings, and there was a line item on there with the payout. It was actually 250,000 because that's the deductible, and then the insurance covered the last 50,000. So um, the other number 700, a million, I'm not sure. Probably like maybe people are adding up staff time
Mm.
or my executive aide. Even though like he was terminated, he made the complaint of retaliation, and in an abundance of caution, the county chose to like consider him as a rehire. I don't know exactly how HR would define it, but he was getting paid through the investigation, not by my choice, but that was a county choice, and so that could be part of the equation. But that wouldn't get it anywhere near 700 or $1 million. I think that his
And he was
I
getting
don't
paid for like another, was it like 6 or 9 months that I read?
know. Oh gosh, let's see. It was about July to December. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. 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 Ready for these community questions?
Oh yeah, let's
All
do
right.
it.
My mine was you brought up the proclamation, and I'm so glad that you brought that up because I I think proclamations are bullshit. I'll just get it out there. I think they're complete bullshit. And your office, or not you, but like the Board of County Commissions, they actually reached out to me during Black History Month. And I even had somebody, one of our mutual friends was like, "Oh, you should send that to Emily," because I'm just like, I'm not doing that. I think it's bullshit.
Mhm.
You have me come up here, have me tell my story of how hard it is to be a Black businessman in this county, and then after I spill my freaking trauma out, and then nothing really happens. And um, what exactly is a proclamation? Because on this side of it, it seems very fucking performative.
Yeah. You just hit on one of my passion projects. Okay. I just want to say that. So you might have to cut me off if I talk too much here. But I first before I start, because I'm going to go on a little tangent, but before I start, I want to say the staff who bring the proclamations forward and decide like on the presentations, and they plan the presentations and the receptions that we do, they do put a lot of time into that. They put a lot of work into that. I don't want to diminish that at all. Like staff tries really hard to make those work smoothly, and I think that they do a great job at that. But I think that the concept of a proclamation is performative. I'm trying to hold back because I've got like a little bit of my diplomacy hat on right now.
Please
But
don't.
yeah, but I shouldn't, because like the proclamations feel so performative, and I've actually been okay. Let's see here. Get my thoughts together. Okay, let me just give you an example. For the Board of Health, we created our strategic plan a couple years back. Long story short, we developed subcommittees as a result of this strategic plan. And one of them was the education and outreach subcommittee. And I was the chair of that subcommittee. And we started talking about like, what does education and outreach look like in the Board of Health and for the community? And we were like, what about the proclamations? That seems like a really good opportunity to provide some education and outreach in a way that's meaningful. Like rather than just having staff who are already busy, they already have a full plate, rather than having them go out and try to find people who match a proclamation and they might not even have a connection with that person. What if we had this, like I created in my mind and on paper, but it didn't go any farther than that, this ambassador program for the Board of Health, where like a Board of Health ambassador, like I could be an ambassador, for example, for like LGBTQ, Pride Month. And because that's, I'm a member of that community and it's something that's close to me. And so I could step forward and say, hey, for this proclamation, I already have ties to these groups and these people in the community. I would love to go and meet with them and see if they'd be interested in coming and talking for a proclamation. So my idea was like, and then we could have a person who kind of shadows the ambassador. So someone who could be like, hey, I'm not a part of that community, but I'd like to learn more. Can I be your like shadow or sidekick or whatever? And so then people could go together, Board of Health members could go together into the community and actually meet with people, sit down in someone's living room, sit down and have coffee with someone, go for a walk around the lake with someone and talk to them about what this means to them. What's the significance? So like if I were to reach out and say, Tony, I'm an ambassador for the Board of Health and we're doing Black History Month proclamation this month. Like you had me on your show. Like I really appreciate it. And I'm interested in, hearing more about what you think about Black History Month and what it looks like in the community and just in the world. Like, what does this mean for you? And like, why is it important? And why should the county care? And what can the county do to like help any issues or like, work on solutions or build community with people? What does that look like to you? And we could sit down and have a conversation. And that would help with like, not only like the language of the proclamation, because we want the language to be developed by people who are really in it, like who really understand what we're talking about, not just people who are trying their best and maybe don't even have that lived experience. So like we should have people who are actually wanting to be a part of it, not just like we're reaching out to whoever we can think of. And then for the actual proclamation piece, when we have the presentation, rather than having, well, in the Board of Health, it's a bit different because we sit around the room and in the square table, like what the Board of County Commissioners work sessions are set up like. So the structure is a bit different because people aren't coming up to a podium necessarily. But like we have them come, we have guests for proclamations come and sit at the table. And so, but we have staff who are just like, hey, come sit at the table the day of. So they'll walk in and people are probably nervous because they have to speak at a public meeting and stuff. And then they're told, hey, just come sit at the table. We've had that happen in some cases, and people come to speak and they're invited up to the table and they don't come because they're too nervous. So if we had an ambassador, then me, going with the example of me bringing you in, I could come up and sit with you at the table and say, hey, everyone, I'm the Board of Health ambassador this month. This is Tony Taylor. This is why I reached out to him. Here's my connection with him. And here's why I think he's a great person to come and talk to us about what the real needs of the community are and like what they see the county doing right and doing wrong and where we could do something better. And then I could turn it over to you and you could talk about whatever you want to say. And I think, let me just ask you, taking you through that concept, what do you think about that versus what we do now?
No, I like it. I like it because it sounds like it's actually about results and actually getting shit done instead of a photo op for the Olympian or the Chronicle or whatever. I like that because I don't know, like I've been doing what I do for several years now, and I dread Black History Month. Not because of what it is or what it's supposed to do, but because of what it doesn't do.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's one of those things I get triggered. Just like when your office contacted me, I'm just like, damn, the month has, I think it was like the 3rd and y'all were like the 7th person to reach out. And I'm like, no, this needs to stop. And then, your staff was really cool. They were like, oh yeah, we'll bring this forward and we'll let me talk about this and I'll get back to you. I didn't hear anything back But I thought it was cool that the person that reached out was open to it. But yeah, I think that sounds cool if it's what are we doing right and what could we do better to actually help and move the needle.
Yeah.
Not like me feeling like I need to go put on a clown nose and clown shoes. So yeah, that's my thinking on that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wish that we could do even more than that. Like I wish that if we're gonna do something, like let's make an action go along with it versus just a piece of paper and a picture. Like I think that's important. Is like what now? And like we have the No Kings rally coming up this weekend, I think, and like the question that always comes out of that in the groups I'm involved with is like, what now? Like there's a lot of people who show up that day and then that's the only day they show up. So what do we do next? Like if we're bringing that energy forward, if we're going to spend energy on a proclamation for something that's so significant, what is next? Like what comes next? And that's not part of the conversation right now. And I think it has to be if proclamations are going to mean anything to people.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I agree. And I think that is important, especially, for the people that's going to be honored. And I would encourage, for the folks that's listening and, the folks that are watching this, they're like, oh man, it's full of shit. You should just take the honor, take the honor. It's a big deal. But, I would say Google my name and look at the magazine covers that I've been on, especially here locally, and look at around the page. It's always centered around some Black history, is always centered around BIPOC stuff. And, in my opinion, nobody wants to feel like they're the token.
Yeah.
That's when this community, and I'll say that, and that's when this community reaches out to me. And I've heard that not just from the Black community. I've heard that from, my friends that are, other marginalized communities. They feel the same way. Like they reach out to us when this happened, or they reach out to that when that happens. And I don't want to be the token. I don't want to have nothing to do with it if that's what it's going to be. And that's typically what it is. It's always something. Look at what we're doing for the Black community. Look at what we're doing for this community. Look at what we're doing, instead of like, we're fucking up and let's fix it. And that's my thoughts. You still got some time for these questions?
I've got all the time in the world.
Okay. Don't tell me that. All right. And this could be rapid fire. I know my folks would kill me if I didn't ask you this. Michael Newman, plans for the homeless.
Plans for the homeless. That's the question?
That's the question. Plans for the homeless, question mark.
All right. Plans for the homeless. Well, let's see. My plans versus other plans. Okay. So for me, I'm on the Regional Housing Council. I was the chair last year and I serve as the vice chair this year. And we need to be a lot more creative about what we're doing with our current funding situation. We're losing funding. There's a lot of programs and projects that are at risk right now. What we should be doing as public officials is allocating our resources in a way that aligns with our values. So if we say that we don't want homelessness to be in Thurston County, or like we want to reduce homelessness, get people off the streets, prevent people from becoming homeless in the first place, where are our dollars going? Why aren't they going towards that? Like, where do we need to readjust? Where do we need to reorganize? Because we do have money that is discretionary. All of it is earmarked. It's all accounted for. It's all being spent on existing programs. But, look at the clerk's office right now. And these are rapid fire, so I won't go into that. But, that's what I would say is like, we need to reallocate our resources appropriately to really solve the problem. And where our resources are lacking, like the federal government is cutting our funds, we should prioritize what we have here available locally, because the future is uncertain with federal funding. So we have to really figure out, if we didn't rely on federal funding, what would we do locally? So that's what I would say for me personally.
What do you think is different about, because I know one of the folks that you're running against has been very vocal about the houseless condition that we have. what do you think is realistic about their ideas or unrealistic?
Yeah. So my opponent, Nick Dunning, also serves on the Regional Housing Council. And what I think is really realistic about Nick's views on housing is that accountability matters. That's where we align. Like, accountability matters. If we're going to be funding projects, we should be making sure that the people who are going through those programs as participants are able to be successful and they are equipped with the resources they need. So accountability is where we definitely align. I think that the way we define accountability might look a little different, but the bottom line is that, like, we don't want the community to suffer. So we do agree on that. When you say unrealistic, I wouldn't say I think any, let's see, I'm trying to think, is anything he said unrealistic? A couple things that I think are unrealistic are like the way that he fights hard against the housing first concept. That is, where there is strong evidence, there's decades of evidence. So we don't agree on that. Housing first is the solution, but the way it's implemented is not always successful because people don't always understand the full context of what housing first really means, which is wraparound supportive services. And we have to make sure that that's happening. And if it's not happening, we shouldn't be calling it housing first, even though people still do call it that because that's where they get grant money, is if they use these buzzwords. But housing first has to be implemented appropriately. And there are probably very few, I could count on one hand how many projects are actually operating with that vision and that model. So saying housing first doesn't work is just not true.
I love it. I love it. Let's go. Thoughts on upcoming re-election and those running against you. This is from political strategist Vonnie Turner.
All right. Upcoming election, I'm super excited. I'm really looking forward to it. I've got a lot of support. I've raised about $10,000 in donations already from a number of people. I'm proud of that. Not a lot of huge donations, but very many small ones. And that's how I won last time, was with a lot of support from people who could give just enough because they're living paycheck to paycheck. So having that grassroots support means the world to me. And I'm very excited to see what this upcoming election holds. For my opponents, I have a lot of respect for everybody, including my opponents. I always, like last time, view my opponents as also my constituents. So these are people I care about and I want to hear what they have to say. So I'm looking forward to the conversations that we'll have. I have a lot of respect for both of my opponents, and I'm really excited, honestly, to see where conversations lead and how we can continue to collaborate, because that's, we're all public officials. All three of us are currently elected. So we're going to have some pretty good conversations, and I trust that, they're both elected because they believe in the community. So we'll meet in the middle there, and we'll kind of see where the rest takes us.
How did this is coming from Vonnie as well. How did Thurston County get out? How did the budget blindness come to be? How could there have been more transparency?
Yeah, that's something I am actually, describing as one of my primary campaign values, because I voted no on the budget alongside Commissioner Rachel Grant. We are the only two commissioners who voted no on the budget. And it's because of this exact thing. I really think the budget needs to be more transparent to the public, but also to us as commissioners. There were a lot of times that we didn't get the information we asked for in a timely manner. And there, for a variety of reasons. We also had a whole system transition to what we were calling TC Connect. And we just had a briefing on it this week, and I still probably would describe it poorly, but TC Connect is our system for everything, for payroll, for information, for agendas, for training, for everything. So we had a major transition, and that caused a lot of issues with the budget. Even our budget staff didn't have access to the things they needed sometimes because of this system transition happening so poorly, because our vendor just was awful. So there's that. But budget transparency has to be about accepting responsibility for what we're not doing correctly and allowing the public to provide input, being very clear with the public on what's going on, because government budgeting is not easy, even for us as elected officials. So how does it feel for the public? Like, they don't understand what's going on. We used to have an interactive budget module, like a dashboard on our website. I don't even think that exists anymore. And that was one way the public could get questions answered right away, just by messing around with the online tools. So I don't know. Does that answer the question?
No, it does. A follow up to that. I did hear there was a statement I think that you made regarding the deficit that y'all have as far as the budget. That I was like, oh, I wonder what she mean by that. Do
Mhm.
you want to clear up the donation part? Because and I'll be real with you, Emily. Man, I we pay a couple G's a month for our
Mhm.
mortgage, and I tell you right now, I'm not donating shit to
Yeah,
Thurston. All right.
and
So
I
do
don't
you
blame you.
I know your other constituents. I know they probably feel the same way that I do.
Yes, many do, and I don't blame you at all. Uh, I want to say the interview with King Five was about an hour and a half, and they took like two sentences, which is exactly what like people were telling. The county manager told me, Commissioner Menzer told me, they're like, "Look, this happened in Ty, Commissioner Menzer."
And you were
They're
the
like,
only one that was willing to meet with them.
right, yeah, and Ty tried to warn me. He said they're gonna take one sentence. You're gonna say all this good stuff. They're gonna take one sentence. So of course they took the one that like without context it doesn't make any sense. I wasn't suggesting that the community donates to fund the county business, like because the county's facing a deficit. What I was explaining to the reporter was that when services matter to people the most, like when we're looking at public safety, for example, the budget at first was everybody was facing a 26% cut. Every office, every department was facing a 26% cut. And I wish I had the spreadsheet in front of me and I don't, but I think that for the sheriff, it was about like, it was well over $10 million that he would have received as a cut. I think it was closer to almost 20, but like I said, don't quote me on that.
Mhm.
And I can even follow up with you later if you want to add it to this later, but he was facing a huge cut, the sheriff's office. And obviously like that would be detrimental to our public safety system to just cut a budget that fast with that much and like not be able to operate the jail, for example.
Mhm.
You know, so we had to get creative. The sheriff came forward. He brought a lot of people forward for public comment. And because of that pressure, we got creative and we were able to cut his level of cut, if that makes sense, down to like about $2 million. But the clerk's office faced over a million. Wait, at the end of the day, I think it was like 770,000 or something like that. But one of our last iterations of the budget was a little over $1 million of a cut for the clerk. And it's like the clerk's total budget. Gosh, I really wish I had the numbers in front of me, but it's not anywhere near what the sheriff has. I wish I had it in front of me because it's important to know like the context between like a $2 million cut for an office that has about a $60 million general fund budget. That's not a lot. And the clerk faced almost $1 million in a
Mhm.
cut for an office that runs very lean and it's like under a $2 million budget, I think. Like I said, don't quote me. I really wish I had these numbers on me now, but I should have brought it. But
No, you're good.
yeah, so like what I was trying to explain to the reporter was that like if we're going to be able to get creative over here with the sheriff and figure out a way to like reduce his cut down to $2 million, why aren't we being creative over here with the clerk's office? Like what can we do to reduce her level of cut? Because $700,000 in a $1 billion budget is small enough of an amount that we should have been able to be creative about how to get those cuts reduced. Because at the end of the day, the services to the public are so important. And these services specifically that the clerk's office provides is like people like people like me who like I sat in the juvenile court and filled out a protection order against the person, this person from 2024, filled out the whole thing and then left without filing it because I was too afraid to have that as a public record and potentially open a can of worms. And so, and people are there in their most vulnerable day to
Mhm.
try to get protection from someone who is threatening their life and there's nobody there to help them. And I was just saying to the reporter, we should get creative about this. And if we have zero leads whatsoever, we're saying we can't do anything, which is not true. I disagree with that, which is why I voted no on the budget. But if the county as a whole and a majority of the board is going to say, we turned over every single rock, which again, we didn't, and there's nothing left, there's no change left, Okay, let's open a donation fund, because I can hear what you're saying. Like, I'm not donating, I pay taxes and it's enough. I get that and I hear you. But for some people who donate to like victims of domestic violence through nonprofit organizations because they have the income to be able to donate to that cause, I'm sure there are people who would donate so that there's a volunteer position available, or like a position available for support for those who are facing domestic violence. And so that's what I was saying, was in that specific context, I'm sure that people would be willing to donate to a cause like that.
Okay, yeah. So it sounds like there was this, and then there's like that. As far as they caught just a little bit of what you were saying, but the bigger thing was like, no, so that people can get these services.
Yes, it was for the domestic violence position in the court that helps with people who are filling out protection orders. That's what I was asking. Like, that's what I was mentioning for donating to, not just like services in general.
Yeah. See, this is why I feel like more elected officials should come to podcasts, because I'm not going to clip it. So I'm not going to do all the clipping to make you look bad. I think that's ridiculous, to be honest. But okay, millionaire tax policy. What is your view on that? Almost everybody asks me that. And
yeah, that's a good question. And I'm, no policy is perfect, but I'm really proud that we were able to pass the millionaire tax. I think the conversation around the millionaire's tax has to be grounded in what's actually working and what's not working in our current system. And in Washington, we rely heavily on regressive taxes. And at the same time, we have like business and occupation taxes that can hit small businesses on revenue, and even when they're not turning a profit. And like, my dad owns small businesses, so I'm familiar with some of those taxes. And our regressive tax system creates real strain for local entrepreneurs, even here in Thurston County. So for me, it's not just about taxing high earners. That's like the narrative, right? That's out there, is like, tax the millionaires, tax the millionaires. But it's not just about that. It's about rebalancing the system. And if we can shift some of that burden off of small businesses and working people and ask those at the very top to contribute more, that's going to create a more stable and equitable local economy, which means small businesses and working families have a better shot at surviving, hiring, paying decent wages, and that all directly impacts our local economy here in the community. So, and at the county level, we see the downstream effects of this imbalanced regressive system every single day, whether we're talking about housing instability or behavioral health needs or gaps in just basic services. So I view something like a millionaire's tax as part of a broader effort to build a system that actually supports people at every level and not just those who are already doing well.
Awesome. And for folks that would are thinking about getting into politics, would you do it over again?
Yeah.
You had to? You would?
Oh yeah. Do it. It's one of the best ways that
you would say something different.
If people ask to get in, if they should get into politics.
Yeah.
I would say absolutely. I would say, like, even like, people say I don't do politics, and it's like, yes, you do, because you live in the world and everything's political. Unfortunately, the roads you drive on, like everything is politics. Like, that's how funding for infrastructure that we use every day is created. That's what decides if we can put an extra house on our property, or if we can build a fence, or how we can talk and interact with our neighbors. Like, there's so much that's political. And I say absolutely yes. And even if you don't want to be an elected official, run for office, because it forces the elected officials, the incumbents, to have conversations that they wouldn't otherwise be having. So you can
though, right? Didn't you have to like run a whole bunch of, didn't you have to like, basically, this is the layman in me. I feel like you got to beg for a whole bunch of money, right?
You do. And that's like the worst part. But I'm trying to reframe that in my brain, because like, it's not about donating to me personally. It's about donating to the people I'm serving in this position. And so if I reframe it that way, where it's like, you're donating to my campaign because I don't take money from businesses who can contribute more than the maximum amount that an individual donor can contribute, which is $1,200 for the primary and $1,200 for the general. And I don't take donations from entities that can donate more than that. And so where other people could get like $5,000 from a developing agency or like the Realtor Association, I can only get $1,200 from individuals. And I don't take money from corporations or businesses or special interests. So donating to my campaign, even $5, $10, it really adds up. And it actually means a lot. Like a $5 donation means so much to me because it adds to the list of people who care and believe in this vision. And so, to me, like a $1,200 donation is obviously amazing because you need resources to run a campaign. But a $5 donation means something deep to me. It means that someone who's working paycheck to paycheck or living paycheck to paycheck and who can only give $5 believes in this vision. And that's exactly the type of person I'm working for. So every donation matters.
If you, and this is the last one, I'll have you kind of talk to the audience as the last words, like something that you want to leave them with, and then we'll close.
Yeah, you don't want to give me any other prompt than that. You just want me to. Oh, you're even putting me all by myself up here on the screen. All right. Well, I see how it is, Tony. I would say to the community, if you're listening, I appreciate you for listening, for taking the time to really hear my side of the story. For those who have believed in me the whole time, you have no idea how much that means to me. Like the reason I'm here today is because of all the support that I've had. And I realize I'm privileged to have that support, but everybody deserves it. And, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm working for the people. So thank you for this opportunity, Tony. And I look forward to staying connected.
This podcast. Well, I'm sure you enjoyed it. If you're still here with us, what I want you to do is head over to your favorite podcast and streaming network and give us a download, subscribe to the channel, and also let us know what you think about the show. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you for the things that you've done. Thank you for the things that you're doing. And especially thank you for the things that you're going to do, because I know that you're going to do something amazing.